This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Hello and welcome to War Horses, the only college equestrian podcast that is still getting things up and running in this new season. I am your host, Auburn Elvis. Let's talk about some college equestrian. Some people have noticed there's been talk. Hey, Auburn Elvis, you haven't been doing as many of the matchup graphics and stuff, and what's going on? Well, all right, there've been some changes in the off season with the article. We sort of lost our ride with Sports Illustrated, so I can't really call myself Sports Illustrated reporter anymore, which is terrible. But anyway, so they're making some changes over at Locked On Auburn and Auburn Daily and all that. So what we're going to do is I found that, it's just as easy for me to do a video recap as it is to do a written article. So I'm going to be transitioning to that. So I did the one video recap for the home Auburn meet against TCU, and I'm going to going forward just do that for all of them. It's actually, I think, a little quicker going to be once I get some of my visual templates done and Photoshop and everything like that. It'll be a little bit quicker for me to just do a quick video recap instead of writing out the article and then posting it and all that stuff. So look for that in the upcoming meet this weekend. That's what I'm going to be doing, and I'll be shooting that from my office, my studio. And that brings up another point. So typically I don't record in this room that I'm recording in because I have a very small home office and it's really echoey. However, recently I have been putting in sound absorbing material, not just regular blankets, actual sound absorbing blankets, and redoing some things in here so that hopefully it's a little bit less echoey. It doesn't sound like I'm at the bottom of a well. I haven't finished it, so I'm testing today to see what it sounds like. And I did some other tests and it's okay. It's not bad. So I can fix some stuff in post. I'm happy with where it's at, but it should get even better going forward. Plus, it'll allow me to do some video stuff on the fly that I can just come in here and do that. So that should get us all a better experience going forward. But yeah, that's enough about housekeeping stuff for me. Let's talk about some meet recaps. So we had some good action this weekend. We had, first off, SMU at Texas A&M. So I basically figured this one was going to be kind of close, that the Aggies would win because, again, whenever you got two teams that are relatively close in ability, the home team's probably going to win this year. The Aggies did really well. So, all right, let's see. The first event was flat. That went 4-1 for Texas A&M. So right there, they're off to a great start. Reining was the event going on over in Western, and they did 4-1 in that as well. So they had a big 8-2 halftime lead. That's really tough for a team to come back from that, especially on the road. And the meet was practically over at the half. Now, Fences was up in the second half. SMU won that 3-2. So here they got a majority of the points. They're hoping to make a comeback, but still Texas A&M did get 2 points, and that meant that if any other points happened their way, I mean, they were already guaranteed at least a tie. If any other points they were going to win, well, they got some more points. Horsemanship went 4-1 for Texas A&M. So real big finish, left no doubt who the better team was that day, and got the big home meet there. So yeah, and like I've been saying, if you got to win all your home meets if you want to be taken seriously as a national title contender. And Texas A&M fits that bill right now. For SMU, we expected this loss. It wasn't as close as we expected. Yeah, I mean, they had a couple of riders getting flats, or getting MOPs in the flat and horsemanship. I think Ellie Yeager and Nia Kearns. But that was pretty much the high point for them. They got a few more points, but still, they were behind the whole day and just could never catch back up. Really, it's been rough starting out their season with these two road meets like this. And frankly, the schedule isn't going to get any easier because now they've got a trip to Georgia coming up in a week and a half. So yikes. Not great scheduling there, Mustangs. All right, next meet. Oklahoma State at TCU. This was our first Big 12 conference meet. It is a rematch of last season's conference championship. We saw TCU struggle against SMU at home, but I still expected them to win this one. Fences was 4-1 for TCU. Great start for the home team. they've looked out pretty, almost, well, no, I'd say they look outstanding in fences so far this year. And that continued for them on Thursday. So really good job by the TCU fences team so far. Then in reining, that went 3-2 for TCU. So they got the majority of points there. They were going into half leading 7-3. So they're fully in control. Then on the flat, Oklahoma State makes their move. They won the event 3-2. Let's see, but it is too little too late. Then horsemanship went 3-2, and that's actually impressive for Oklahoma State to get 3-2 away from TCU like that, because TCU has been known for horsemanship for the past year now, and to see a team beat them, and Auburn did the same thing. So yeah, interesting stuff going on with TCU's horsemanship squad. So good for Oklahoma State to capitalize on that. So anyway, the whole meet ended up being an 11-9 win for TCU. This loss for the Cowgirls was kind of expected, and I frankly I don't think they should be very down on themselves on this. Again, it was on the road against a really good opponent. Probably going to lose when you're in that situation, and I think we're going to see this season that's just a tough situation for everybody. They came close, maybe to getting a TC an upset, maybe, but this was an encouraging result. Okay, for TCU, they looked good. They didn't look quite as good as some other teams have been looking at home, but they still have that Georgia win on the road 2 weeks ago, and that is the highlight of their resume, and nobody else has a road win as good as that. So, yeah, overall, they are 3-1 after playing SMU, Auburn, Georgia, and Oklahoma State. And I'm telling you, I don't think there's any other team in the nation that would be 3-1, with that slate of opponents so far this early in the season. So, good job for them. Next meet we want to look at is Fresno State at South Dakota State. I was hoping that the Bulldogs would improve some from last season, and looks like maybe they did. The flat went 3-2 for South Dakota State, so here we've got the home team looking good. Maybe Fresno State's maybe getting a little worried. Well, reining went 3-1 for Fresno State, so the Bulldogs ended up with a strong reining performance there, and that made it 5-4. They had the small lead at the half. Then we had fences. That went 3-2 for Fresno State. They extended their lead a little bit, and then they just slammed the door in horsemanship. They won that 3-0, and yeah, they ended up with the big win, 11-5 win for Fresno State. They really needed this. This was the kind of win that they couldn't really get last season, so to see them go on the road and do that right out of the gate, that is a good sign that things are improving for the Bulldogs. For the Jackrabbits, they were in it until the end, but they just couldn't get it done. Tough to take a home loss like this right out of the gate, but it does happen sometimes. Just ask Georgia. But yeah, they had another meet coming up. We'll talk about that in a second, because first we're going to talk about Fresno State versus UT Martin. Now, I said this one was going to be a good indicator of which team would be able to make a good case for getting into the playoffs. Let's see how this went. The flat started things off. That went 3-1 for Fresno State, so good start there for the Bulldogs at a neutral site. Then reining was up next. That was 3-0 for UT Martin. So here we see, UT Martin's not just going to roll over. They come charging right back, and they take a 4-3 lead at half. And then they had an overnight break because of just the way things work. And then the next day they got going with fences. That went 3-1 for Fresno State. And so that put them out in front. And if they could just hold their own in the final event, horsemanship, they would remain undefeated. And horsemanship ended up 2-2. So that was good enough for Fresno State to eke out this neutral site victory. They won 8-7, and good job, Bulldogs. Now, like I said, this is a great start, 2-0, can't get any better than that. And they just didn't get these kind of wins last year, so here already we can see that they look to be improved from last year. For UT Martin, this was a rough loss. If they could have gotten this neutral site win, they would have a good start at making their case to get into the national championship tournament in April. But as things are now, they're really going to need to do well against their conference foes, and they're probably going to need to pull off an upset against one of the larger programs on their schedule as well, just to build up this resume. All right, so now let's look at UT Martin at South Dakota State. I figured UT Martin was probably going to win this one. This is an ECAC conference meet. Let's see how this went. Fences went 3-1 for UT Martin. Flat went 3-2 for South Dakota State. So here we are. We're all together in this. Oh, actually, I don't know how the order of the event, so I'm just doing them in the alphabetical order. So I don't know what order they really went in, but at this point, South Dakota State's, this is neck and neck. Horsemanship went 4-1 for UT Martin, and reining went 5-0. It was a sweep for UT Martin. So might have started out close, but it didn't end up close. The Jackrabbits had some nice rides on the flat, but otherwise they were just confounded all day long. It's a disappointing 0-2 start for them, even if maybe it was expected. But there have been years when they would get at least one of these victories, but it just didn't happen for them this time. For UT Martin, this was a nice bounce back neutral site win. Well, actually, it was a road win, not neutral site, yeah, against a conference opponent too. So, like I said, they're going to have to do this week in, week out. Plus, they're going to have to not beat up, but just get just a tiny victory over somebody with a big name program. Like I think they have Auburn, Georgia on their schedule, so they're going to have to pull an upset in some of those if they want to get down to Ocala. Okay, and then we have one more meet. It's a single discipline meet. It was Swanee at Dartmouth. Now, these two teams are right next to each other in the rankings, so whenever you have a case like that, home team's probably going to win. Let's see what really happened. In flat, that went 3-2 for Dartmouth. So here we've got Swanee keeping things close, but they are a little bit behind. But then Dartmouth just went off in fences. They swept the event 5-0. So that ended up being 8-2 win for Dartmouth. And yeah, basically, if you're wearing a green jacket, your name probably got called in this one. Dartmouth had a really good season last year. We've seen, though, that other teams have gotten better this year, so the field is tougher. So if Dartmouth just wants to keep up with everybody else, they're going to have to get better as well. And we can see that right out of the gate, they get a win, like you would hope, and that's going to help them impress the voters. For Swanee, man, the opposite seems to be happening. It's a little bit of bad luck just starting out away from home, but this is a team that they're close to, in ability. So if they had gotten that win, that would have been great. It would have been amazing. It would have been the second best road victory so far, but they didn't get it. So now they're they don't have any room for error now. Looking forward, at their schedule, they're going to host Sweetbriar and Lynchburg, I think, this weekend. So, boy, if they could pull off an upset of one of those, then they're back in business. But if they take 2 losses at home, man, it's going to be rough for the Tigers there. So we'll see how that goes. That is all of the meets that we had to take a look at this past week. So now let's take a look at the official Auburn Elvis College Equestrian rankings. Okay, so we are into week 3. We're starting to get some nice data that we can use to gauge how good these teams are, but it is still early. We still got teams out there that haven't ridden against anybody yet, so these rankings are going to be a combination of everybody's current resumes plus their returning talent. Because again, that's what I used in the preseason, and we're slowly getting away from that and relying more and more on the resumes, but we don't have enough of data points on everybody that we could really just abandon the returning talent. So we're still going to use that and factor that in some, but again, results matter. So anyway, here's how we go. Here's how we're going to do this. And right out of the gate, I'm just going to tell you, you're going to be upset with me. Well, everybody but one team's going to be upset with me, but just hear me out. Number 1 is TCU. Now, I know you think I'm crazy or maybe that I'm lazy, but no, I can defend this one. TCU has ridden against defending national champs SMU at home, and they won that. Then they went on the road to Auburn and Georgia, and they won one of those, lost the other. And then they just beat Oklahoma State at home, okay? So we got more data on TCU than we've got on anybody else, and almost all of it is great, okay? So they are going to remain the number 1 team simply because we have fewer questions about TCU, okay? We know more about what they can and can't do than any other team out there, and most of what we know is pretty good, so I'm keeping them at number 1. Number 2 is Texas A&M. The Aggies are 1-0, and they jump up from 4th to 2 in my rankings after that home beatdown of SMU. But keep in mind, this was at home. We still have not seen them on the road. If that meet had been at SMU, the Aggies would still be the same team, but they could have easily lost that and been 0-1 instead of 1-0. So a lot depends right now on where you're playing as much as who you're playing. All I'm saying here is let's just see how, the Aggies do on the road before we get too crazy. Number 3 is Auburn. The Tigers were idle this week. They're 1-0. They are about to head down to South Carolina. Pretty much like Texas A&M, they have looked impressive at home, but we've got to wait and see how they do on the road before we just start shooting them up the rankings. Number 4 is SMU. The Mustangs dropped a couple of spots here after getting blown out on the road. But like I said, a lot of it's their schedule. And unfortunately for them, their schedule doesn't get any easier. They're probably going to fall some more down in the rankings before they start climbing back up. So enjoy things while you can, Mustangs, because, yeah, opening up 3 straight road meets was just not a good idea. All right, number 5 is Oklahoma State. The Cowgirls will remain in this spot. Their close road loss to TCU is better than Georgia's close home loss to the Frogs. So that comparison between those two teams should be obvious. Some folks could probably make a case that South Carolina being 2-0, that they should be ahead of Oklahoma State. But Oklahoma State faced a much, much tougher opponent than the Gamecocks did up in Delaware. So that, plus the higher returning talent level that you see at Oklahoma State, it makes me feel comfortable that I should leave them at number 5 for now. Number 6 is Georgia. The Bulldogs' loss to TCU looks a little bit better as the Frogs keep on winning, but Georgia's really going to need to get back in the saddle and show folks what they're capable of doing. They're going to host SMU in a week and a half, so we'll see you then. Number 7 is South Carolina. The Gamecocks' record alone would have them higher, and yeah, I'll admit that, but this is so early that I'm going to keep them at number 7 based on all the unknowns for them and other teams. We just don't know a lot about South Carolina. I think they're better than they were last year, but we really don't know because they just haven't played a lot of meets. And I think, they might upset Auburn at home this week, but until they actually do that, I'm going to keep them down at number 7. And the last team that would make it into the playoffs if the season ended today is number 8, Fresno State. The Bulldogs returned to the top 8 after more than a year as cellar dwellers. They scored a couple of good wins away from Fresno this past week, and if they can keep that up, they should remain in contention for a playoff spot. So here are the next 2 teams trying to supplant the Bulldogs. Number 9, UC Davis. The Aggies have not ridden yet, but we'll find out how good they really are when they host Fresno State this week. And number 10 is Baylor. The Bears also have not ridden yet, so they slide one spot when Fresno State re-entered the top 10. Baylor is going to go to TCU this week, which is not great for them, but who knows what might happen. Now let's take a look at the single discipline rankings. We only had one meet this week, but some of the rankings did change as a result of that. Number 1 is still College of Charleston. Nobody in the country has a better resume, so the Cougars are still the team to beat. At number 2, we have Sweetbriar. The Vixens will be riding at Swanee this weekend, so we'll soon see how they look this year. At number 3, we have Lynchburg. The Hornets are 1-1 and are going to travel to Swanee as well. A road win there would help them rebuild their reputation since that season-opening home loss to Charleston. Number 4 is Dartmouth. The Green beat Swanee at home to start the season, and now they're going to take a few weeks off before going to Sacred Heart. Number 5 is Centenary.
It's a twister! It's a twister!
The Cyclones were idle, but with Swanee losing to open their season, Centenary's neutral site win over Bridgewater boosts them up to number 5. And at number 6, we have Swanee. The Tigers lost on the road, but still return a lot of talent, and that's keeping them above Sacred Heart for now. Number 7 is Sacred Heart. The Pioneers haven't ridden yet, but they're going to host Dartmouth in a few weeks, and that will be their chance to show us how good they are. Number 8 is Berry. Still no meets from the Vikings, so they're going to stay at number 8 this week. They're going to host Bridgewater in November. And number 9 is Bridgewater. The Eagles opened with a home loss, and now their schedule gets even tougher. They're going to have 4 straight road meets, and it's going to take some really great riding for them to start moving back up the rankings. All right, so those were the rankings. Now let's take a look at our meet previews. First up, we've got Baylor at TCU. I think this is on a Thursday. We're going to get our first look at the Bears, but it's going to be on the road, so I'm not super optimistic for their chances. This is probably going to be a loss for any visiting team in the country going into this situation. So yes, I'm going to pick TCU to win this, and it's probably going to be by at least 5 points. So big win for the Frogs. Next one is Texas A&M at Delaware State. This will be a nice way for the Aggies to sort of ease into the road part of their schedule. We saw Carolina go up to Delaware and get the win. I expect we're going to see the same from Texas A&M, even if they do some experimenting with their starting lineup and get some less experienced riders a chance in the saddle. Sweetbriar at Swanee. Now, Swanee might be able to get this home upset, but I don't know. I kind of doubt that they're going to do it. I think it's going to be close, but I think this is going to be a victory for the visiting Vixens. Auburn at South Carolina. Okay, so yeah, these teams are close together. Even though, they're kind of far apart in the rankings, this skill-wise, they're close enough to say, yeah, these are 2 close teams. And when you have 2 close teams this season, the home team's probably going to win. So I'll just say that we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but one of these teams is going to end the day being really, really, really happy, and the other team will probably be Auburn. Now, the Tigers do look better on paper, but that's not where these meets are ridden. We've seen Auburn disappoint in the road against a team that they had more talent over, and that was last season, but I think we might see a repeat of that this season as well. And yeah, like I said, whenever you got those 2 teams that are close together, the home team usually wins. That's what I'm going to stick with, and until somebody proves me wrong, like TCU did against Georgia. But that's just one data point. Let's get some more data. So I think Carolina's going to win this one in a squeaker, probably 1 point, maybe 2 points. Next meet to look at, Lynchburg at Swanee. The Hornets are also going to be visiting the Tigers. I think we're going to see a similar result to that Sweetbriar-Swanee matchup. I think the Hornets win this one by a few points. Now, the schedule doesn't have Lynchburg and Sweetbriar facing off at a neutral site. Normally, when you see 3 teams get together, you see them all play each other. It'd be really cool to see that. It's not on the schedule, so don't know if it's going to happen. It'd be really cool if it did, but if it doesn't, hey, that's just the way it is. So I'm not going to give a prediction on this one, but it would be fun to see. And then our last meet of the weekend is Fresno State at UC Davis. So we've got 2 California schools, our only 2 California schools, going up against each other, and they are very evenly matched. They're right next to each other in the rankings, and I'm going to pick the Aggies to defeat the Bulldogs in this one. So again, sticking with that home team wins when the 2 teams are close line of thought. Well, that is everything for this week's show. We're getting deeper and deeper into the fall season. Soon, most all the teams will have ridden, and then before you know it, we're going to have the winter break. So I'll be right here keeping you up to date on all the action. I am your host, Auburn Elvis. Thank you very much for listening, and war horses.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.